welcome to another video on my channel. Interview season is coming up, in particular Oxbridge Interviews, and there's obviously quite a bit of frenzy around this time. You know, everyone's trying to do their best, everyone's trying to see the best ways of preparing for interviews. I am here to give you some advice, and I know there's already a ton of videos on the internet, but I want to give you advice on how to structure your answers. I think there's a lot of general tips. I will start with some general tips, just like 2 or 3 that I thought helped me and which is important to keep in mind. And then the main focus of this video is going to be on how to structure your answers effectively. So the first thing to remember is that it's a holistic process. The interview is not the be all and end all. Just because one interview goes bad or you think that it goes bad doesn't mean it has, and it doesn't mean that it will completely sort of hinder your chances of getting an offer. I came out of my second interview thinking that it didn't go as well as I would have liked it to go, but I still got an offer and I am here at Cambridge studying law. So how you think the interviews go and how they really go, it's a bit of a mystery. I mean, sometimes people come out crying and they get offers, so it's nothing to go by. And then practicing is so important for your interviews. You can't just turn up and, you know, yes, you've got a passion for your subject, yes, you're interested in your subject, but that's not enough. You probably don't talk about your subject, about the passion you have for your subject, about the concepts in your subject on a daily basis. When I was applying for law, I didn't talk about law to anyone. I didn't study law at A-level or at GCSE. So I had to get used to talking about my subject, and that is so important. You need to make sure that you are talking about your subject, whether it's, you know, just talking about it to yourself, talk out loud about it, talking to your friends, your family, anyone you can find. Just, you know, tell them your ideas, ask them to ask you questions, and it honestly will help you, because then you're verbalizing your ideas, and when you're verbalizing it, I think it's often easier to look back and see, oh, okay, but I missed this point, or maybe I could have said that, as opposed to when you're just thinking about these ideas. Or maybe write down ideas. You know, if you've got no one to talk to about your subject, you can always write down, yeah, what I think about this particular topic, or what I think the answer could be for this interview question. And there's obviously so many practice questions online. Just type your subject and Oxbridge interview questions, a whole load of lists of questions will come up. I will leave some links down below, mainly to do with law, the ones I used, but the same website should have your subject in them as well. And my third and final sort of general point is be 100% on your personal statement. It is so important that you know your personal statement inside out, because if you don't, it's sort of like, it shows sort of a lack of understanding, a lack of commitment. If you've written books, make sure you know what the books are about. If you've written any articles, you know, make sure you're able to verbalize them, you're able to form your own opinions. So now let's move on to the more important part that I really want to talk about, which is how to structure your answer. I think with interviews, it's such a minefield. You can go any way you want. They just want to know how you think and how you approach certain questions, how you approach certain topics. But I think sometimes it's so hard to express your views, you know, efficiently, but also making sure that you're retaining your point. I mean, if you're like me, I'm a bit of a waffler, so I start somewhere and sometimes end somewhere else where I just don't want to be. So structuring your answer is so important, so that you can have, like, you start with a point and you end with a point and you're able to tie those points together. This is how I structured my answers. So number your points. If you're asked, why do you want to study your subject? So if I was asked, why do I want to study law? I should structure my answers by numbers. So there are 3 main reasons why I want to study law, X, Y, Z, and say them in that order. So then your interviewer knows this is how many points they're expecting, and they're unlikely to interrupt you until you've gotten through all your points. And when you're structuring your points, you then remember the points you wanted to say. Often I think if you say your first point, you can forget your second point, because you're so carried away with what you were saying. So when you structure your point, you give sort of a verbal reminder to yourself as well that this is what I want to say and this is what I should include. And it's not easy. It doesn't come by naturally, because when we're talking, you know, in daily life, we're not sitting there going, real reasons why I believe this. So, you know, it is a sort of artificial form of speaking in some ways, but I think it's a good approach to have for interviews, just because it gives structure to your answers, and it also makes you come across as coherent and able to sustain a line of argument and able to sustain your reasoning, which is really important. So that's the main structure of answers. Listen to the question carefully, come up with the sort of ideas you want to say, and divide them into points. Because if you do that, then it will just help your reasoning, and it will just help the interviewers to see your logical structure of thought, and it will make it easier for yourself as well. And the second point about structure is cutting down on filler words, cutting down on maybe. So these sort of filler words, they can be quite hindering to your argument, and it can sometimes come across as not being as confident or not as sure. So when you're making a point, you need to be sure of that point. It's fine not to know it, but the point of these interviews is to take a subject, to take a topic that you know nothing about, and use your own logical judgment to come to a conclusion about that point and be able to support it. And it is so important that you do that. And cutting down filler words, I think, is a way of coming across as coherent again, and coming across as put together. I mean, you don't have to be put together at all, you know, you can have loads of different ideas, but when you're making an argument, when you're making a point, it's important to come across as sure of that point, and come across as if you can back that point up. I said you shouldn't be afraid of being unsure about something. You know, if you're asked a question and you don't understand what a particular word means, or you don't understand what the certain law on something is, and you kind of need that understanding to be able to answer that question fully, it's okay, you know, not to be sure. You just need to respond in an Oxbridge way. And what that way would be was saying, well, I'm not sure what these concepts are, I don't know what X means, but using my judgment, if this was what X meant, then I would say this, or if this is what X didn't mean, then I wouldn't say this. So not just, you know, saying I don't know, but coming up with reasoning, finding your way around that concept that you're not so sure about, because you won't be sure about it. It's most likely that you haven't studied a lot of what you are going to study at university. Important that you do embrace, you know, uncertainty, but find your way around that uncertainty by starting off by saying these phrases like, I'm not sure what this term means, I'm not sure what this defines as, but if it defines as this, or if this is what it's taken to mean, and then create your points that way. So don't memorize answers. I think if I'm telling you to structure your answers, you know, presumably it's a great way to do that by memorizing answers. But memorizing answers does come across as if you're just reading off a script, and it doesn't show your ability to think. It does really come across as artificial, because these interviews are like supervisions that you'd have at Cambridge, and supervisions are essentially just a discussion about a certain topic with a sort of expert on that topic in small groups. So it's not you being able to give the perfect answer, it's a discussion about topics, because there's a lot of uncertainty, there's a lot of sort of ideas, you know, intellectually in all subjects, and you are essentially just trying to put across your view. And if you're reading a script, it'll come across as artificial. It'll show that you can't think, it will show that, you know, you're reliant on scripts, you're unable to form your own judgments. So it's important not to rely on a script or memorize script. It's okay to memorize points, and you definitely should memorize some points. So about why your subject, you should definitely have points memorized for that. You know, if you've written about books or articles in your personal statement, you should definitely have arguments for and against, or whether you agree with the author, or why Oxford. They're important questions that you should have bullet point answers to 100%, but just not memorized. Back to the structure point of coming up with like a coherent way of saying your answer. It's important that you take a moment to think about what you're about to say. I mean, don't just go deep dive into the answer, because Otherwise, as you're speaking, you're going to have so many other ideas popping into your head and you won't be able to incorporate them. So it's some time, and you know, the silence isn't that bad. I mean, it will seem like a very long time of silence, but it honestly isn't. It's important that you use that time to gather your thoughts, come up with some sort of judgment or some sort of reasoning or some sort of answer, and then you fluently can dive into the question, as opposed to just taking it on its basic surface level. You need to take into considerations about other implications that might come into play and how you would address that if you're asked about it. So to summarize, your structure should be, so interviewer asks question, you take 20 to 30 seconds to think about the answer. Then you start off by saying, there are 2 points, there are 3 points that I would like to say regarding this, or I think there are 3 main reasons to this answer. And then you work through each of those reasons, and then at the end you come with a conclusion. So overall, I think this is the most important answer, or overall I think all these points show X, Y, Z. And hopefully that should give you a nice structured answer that makes you come across as coherent and well considered. So that's it from me. I hope this video was useful. If you have any questions, please do leave them in the comments section down below, and I will be back with another video very soon. I'll see you then.